Tem um momento na carreira que precisamos dar um passo além. É hora de fazer uma pós-graduação. Só que muitas vezes o custo pesa no bolso, inviabilizando tudo. Com a pós-graduação do Senac, você não tem esse problema. Cursos com até 50% de desconto e muito mais tempo para pagar. TCC opcional, modelo flexível com aulas presenciais e online e alguns cursos com apenas 12 meses de duração. Não tem mais desculpa, hein? Saiba mais em sp.senac.br/pós-graduação.
All right. Welcome back. It's Fit Nation.
All right, welcome to the show, Jordan Skopp from Brooklyn, New York. How are you, Jordan?
Great to be here, Rich. Thanks.
So, Jordan, I was looking at your website, the stop foul ball netting or foul ball safety now to add netting to most baseball parks, both not just the major league parks, but also the minor league parks, which, as your website still adamantly points out, they're not even looked at most times, I don't think, and a lot of them just do have that net behind the home plate like we used to have at the old Shea Stadium in New York.
Yeah, Rich, thanks for the opportunity. I've been on this matter for about 2 years and just doing my own studying and interviewing people, victims of foul balls, and just learning so much. And once your listeners and the wider listener audiences find out about this, I believe what I hope to achieve is the folks that have been going to games all these years, minor league games, major league games, they'll kind of get their sort of retroactive epiphany of outrage. So, for example, if you realize that you had gone to the game with your growing family twice a year, for 10 years while they were growing up, and maybe that would be a total of 20 visits to minor and major league ballparks, you may come to the conclusion that every single time you had attended those games, although you weren't thinking about foul balls associated with danger and death, once you realize that you could have been part of a weekly or a bi-weekly statistic, you may be starting to scratch your head and say, wait a second, should we have been there all this time? And could have we been part of that group or that part of that ugly statistic? And I think families will come to the conclusion, at least some I hope will, realizing that all those good times were really under false pretenses.
Right. And I know growing up, I remember the picture of Jim Rice running down the I think it was first baseline, I'm sorry, with the child that got hit by his foul ball, and just holding that child to bring her to medical care faster than anyone could have got her in the stands. And that's a highlight of where that net would have been if it is today, vice when it was back then.
Yeah. So, what has been happening in the last few years, there's been some piecemeal nets placed here and there, but before like 2015, 2016, things were exactly the same for like ever. You would have the nets directly behind home plate, a little bit to the right, a little bit to the left, that kind of thing. But I have found out, Rich, through my research, going back to 1970, when Alan Fish, a 14-year-old boy, had died at the Dodger game. It was with his friends, got hit with a ball in the head and died a few days later. I realized that baseball knew all of this, that this was foreseeable and predictable, and they did nothing to heighten our awareness to the fact that you may not want to bring your kid to the game. All they had was a microprint on the back of the ticket that covered their behind, just in case somebody did get hurt. But they did know that people would get hurt. It wasn't a matter if something would get crushed, it was when. And I've been doing statistics and compiling data of how many children have been injured at major and minor league games. I've been interviewing people, a handful of people, victims have been interviewed for my book, including Erwin Goldblum, whose wife unfortunately was killed at the Dodger game in 2018. So happens the last 2 deaths in the last 50 years were at the Dodger games, but countless concussions, countless broken faces, countless, head injuries. And, I know people who have lost eyes and things like that. They've talked to me for the book. So, yeah, love to get into it with you.
I was actually at Dodger Stadium in 2018. I forget who they were. I think they were playing St. Louis when we went. I was out there for my old job, and
right,
that was our respite from work during the day. They brought us to the game at night.
Right,
it's an interesting stadium. The way it's built, the way it's set up.
Yep,
and I think we were right behind home plate, so we were safe because it was netting right there. Right. But I do remember not having much after home plate there, and even in 2018.
Yeah. Well, I'll certainly get into what I can tell you about the 150 ballparks, but just to go back to Dodger Stadium, Mrs. Goldblum, who got killed at Dodger Stadium in 2018, she was actually up in the loge level, which was behind home plate. So it's not always just down the lines. So the Dodgers did something. It took them a year. Something might have happened a day or a week or a month or 3 months later, but at least they got it done. From the time she got killed, about a year after, almost a year, or a few days after 1 year, they elevated the net higher. So hopefully 93-mile-an-hour balls will not be hitting people like it did Mrs. Goldblum. My research is very thorough. It's not like I've been spending on each project. Like when I would find out where the nets are at the ballparks, I would find out, there was a major incident that happened in May or June of 2019. The little girl who got hit in Houston, that was a lot of publicity on that one. Almora from the Cubs at the time hit the ball. Yeah. And unfortunately crushed the little girl. Fortunately, she's alive, and hopefully she's mending well. But at the time, sorry, got a little interference there. You still with me?
I got you.
Yeah. So it happened with Almora. We got a lot of media attention, and that sort of got me into this campaign. I was aware that there was risky proposition for people, mostly non-suspecting fans, because I knew balls were flying into the seats at 100 miles per hour. I believe most fans are going to the games thinking foul balls and good times and not thinking foul balls flirting with danger and death. But what I had found out doing just simple phone calls, this isn't like 6 months of calls or investigation. 4 or 5 months ago, I called all the minor league ballparks that I could reach in America that are associated with Major League Baseball. There's right now 120 remaining minor league ballparks that are minor league teams that are affiliates of the major leagues, where the major league clubs are paying the salaries of those minor league affiliates. So I found out when I connected to nearly 100 out of the 120 that at least 42 still had no netting past the dugout. And where did that little girl get seriously injured? Past the end of the dugout. And that's in the minor leagues. And in Peoria, Illinois, they were even playing with no nets above the dugout. And I was, I actually rented out an airplane and it towed a banner. Your listeners can go to Foul and you can see a video that Tara, who helps me produce these videos, we've created a video and it showed the plane flying over making a statement. Like, how could they even open up their doors?
Right.
And I also had a video produced with Tara that showed before there were nets above the dugouts in like 2014 in Tampa Bay. It showed a ball leaving the bag, going in slow motion, and it goes in between the two guys. And if that had connected with one of those guys, that would have been bad. And that would have been the end of baseball. So unfortunately, it's like a reactionary thing. Baseball's been getting away with this forever. And I say this because they know it's not a matter of if, but when things get crushed. And the general public still in 2021 is not their awareness is not heightened enough. And I'll get into that with you.
After you started this, about 2 years ago,
Yep.
Do you still go to games just to go watch them, or are you more on the lines of trying to get the safety message out?
Sure. I started the message. I hadn't been to any games this year, and last year the season was shut down, or at least there was no fans for the most part. So I haven't been to a game. Would I go to a game in normal circumstances? Yeah, I would, but I kind of aware where to go, where to sit. If I'm going with people, I would take the right caution. When I was calling the box offices in all these minor league cities, when I was asking where their nets were, they were giving me the information, but they were like, "Oh, you're the first guy ever calling to ask me that." So it's telling me that the general public is still not demanding it, because if I'm the only one inquiring where the nets are, that means families of four are not asking the box offices at these minor league cities where the nets are. And I have two reports, a major league report and a minor league report, all at foulballsafetynow.com. And it shows Major League Baseball, it shows 30 seating charts, but only 3 of them have any indication on where the nets are. So if the general public was demanding or saying, part of shopping for a ticket is knowing where the right places are to sit with children, then you would think that the 30 websites with the seating charts would have nets, but only 3 of them do. And this is, like I said, me making phone calls, me exploring where the seats are, where they're not. But at the end of the day, Rich, it really comes down to, regulatory agencies. People may say, oh, the government needs to stay out of everyone's business. But you know what? The regulatory agencies came in the 1970s and they said, families, I'm sorry, but you can't let your kids roll around the back seat anymore. They have to be seatbelted in the back seat. Similar to this, after 1970, when Alan Fish unfortunately got killed, regulatory agencies should have come in and said, listen, baseball, we need to tell you something. We're going to have our own independent netting council of architects and engineers, not your architects and engineers, but ours. And we're going to go to every one of those 30 major league ballparks and those 120 minor league ballparks. And we're going to tell you how high, how far, how wide those nets need to be. So then we can hang a sign in every one of these 150 ballparks that this ballpark is maiming free. And in 2021, we're very far off from that. And the State of the Union in baseball, according to me, which I still remain the undisputed narrative, because nobody wants to come into the room and talk with us, Rich, because they know that I'm presenting reasonable arguments.
If they get into the room, they'll probably have to admit to things that they don't want to admit in person or in public, for that matter. Because they're worried about the bottom line, not the line of safety. They're worried about the bottom line of the dollar in their pockets.
Well, yeah. And there's a lot there. And and before there's ever any integrity in baseball, the people that I know and the people that I've interviewed, people, a man by the name of Rick, who lost his eye, talked to him 2 months ago for the book. Guys like him, they're not going to the game anymore. They're not putting on the game anymore. Possibly they don't even want their children later on, when they do have them, playing baseball anymore. I did have a woman who I talked to at Shea Stadium, lost her eye in 1979. Since you're a New York guy, you may remember Steve Henderson.
Yes.
Steve Henderson hit a line drive, and the little girl was 14 at the time. Her name is Jenny. She interviewed for the book, and Jenny, unfortunately, lost her eye as a teenager. She was in the hospital, and she talks in the book about how Joel Youngblood comes to the hospital, and she's like, well, where's Steve Henderson? And they sent him instead. She was quoted as like he was the pretty boy of the club, so they sent him. Yeah, right. And she was relieved when she was a mom years later that her child never ended up playing baseball. So
Wow.
all of these people that I know that are bitter, that didn't get their bills paid for, because baseball knows they're protected with this little microprint, which has been disrespectful to the fans for 100 years because families weren't making informed decisions when they were going to the game. That microprint was never up on the scoreboard for us to read. It was on the back of the ticket, so families never studied it. These people need an apology. They need to be welcomed back to the game. I rented out another airplane over the Field of Dreams game about a month ago, if everyone was watching, that
Right.
Field of Dreams Iowa scenario. And they're staging their fantasy games over there. Well, they're also staging it again next year. And my goal is to have how many people, certainly a handful of people that I know, be welcomed back, because these people you need to hear their impact statements. And baseball fans need to hear their impact statements, how they were justifiably bitter, how they didn't want to watch games anymore, and how they didn't even want their kids playing baseball years later. These people are forgotten about, they're disrespected. Baseball doesn't treat them with any respect. They can't apologize to them because it's an admission of guilt if they do. Or the families that have been affected by this won't accept baseball's acknowledgement or apology unless they know it's sincere, because they don't want it to happen to the next person. So it's phony baloney unless they plan on fixing the issue. And baseball's been kicking the can down the road for years. It's not only that they have mud on their face. Once this conversation is known, they have crusted mud on their face, and they don't want that to ever come about.
That's right. They don't want the darkness to come over them, the cloud of darkness to come over their whole life at that point. Because most of them have been handed this silver ticket of the franchise from grandpa down to dad, down to them. And this keeps going on and on with that flow of money through them. And if they have that black eye, they'll probably have to leave the business.
Well, I already said 2 weeks into this, if everyone goes to foulballsafetynow.com, when I started publishing these articles on my own on these self-publishing websites, I wrote that MLB owners should be forced to sell the team if they don't take care of this problem today. And that means no more business till you bring in, if it's above your pay grade and your netting counsel can't get it done, you call in the independent netting counsel. They'll come in, they'll do a good job. They know where the balls go and how fast. And they'll say the kids can sit here, they can't sit here. Or you know what? How about having a first time discussion whether it's cool if the balls come up and down? I'm all good. If balls can go up and down and, 3 heavyweights can get in front of a 10-year-old, hey, let the debate begin. That's cool, but no more 100-mile-an-hour balls slamming little kids. And I have documentation of how many statistics, which I'll get into with you. But just to let you know, it's not just it's the broadcasters, it's the writers. These are journalists, mind you. Journalists in New York, as we know, there's probably 25 full-time journalists, baseball journalists with all the various newspapers. And they know the frequency. You see, in my minor league and major league reports, what I did was I stacked quotes from Major League Baseball players, which exposes the double standard. So the people who go to foulballsafetynow.com can see. So I got as many quotes as I can from guys like Lindor and Verlander that say things like, "Oh, there's no way I let my own family sit behind, not behind the nets. They always sit behind the nets." So they're aware, they know minor leaguers who've interviewed me for the book. There's 5,000 minor leaguers who are going for 800 major league jobs. Most of them will not make it. But you know what? 4 of them have had the courage to talk to me. One thing they do tell me is their parents are safe when they come watch them, but are they getting on the public address and heightening the awareness to everyone else? No. Do I blame them for it? Not really. They're in the middle of their dream. They're trying to be major leaguers. How about Tony Clark and the Union? Now these guys are making millions of dollars. Tony Clark, who's the Union guy, who's probably a minor leaguer for 4 or 5 years when he was a young guy 25 years ago. Why aren't they finally making it right for the 5,000 souls that have to bear the burden knowing that they can maim somebody? They know this. Can't be a good feeling for a 20-something-year-old knowing that they're in a community that maims. Whether it probably won't be that one individual, but collectively they know they're in the group. And they know there could be a handful of lost eyes or a handful of broken skulls during their career. And they know that it could be, and it's one of them. And with Almora, just to get back to that 2019 incident, who I'm sure felt horrible about it, but they should all feel horrible about it. And if the team psychologist is not in his ear that night and saying, dude, this is not just you, this is all of us. And we're in a situation here that ain't right. And you have 2 options. You can quit the game, and I wouldn't blame you, because who the hell wants to be in a situation where you maim people, or you band with your brothers and finally say enough is enough. But if it was left on his head alone, that ain't right either. So, but I don't think the team psychologists do that, because, that's a whole nother story in itself. And then you got the journalists and you got the broadcasters. We watch games on TV. You never heard the broadcasters, saying, "Oh, if that guy gets hurt, he's not even covered for his medical." Or, survey some of these will expose the double standard, because we know what the baseball players say. We get their quotes usually in the aftermath. How about surveying some of these broadcasters and journalists? So everyone doesn't want to bite the hand that feeds them, Rich.
And a lot of those guys playing or hungry coming up in the minor leagues, until something happens in front of them or until something happens to someone they know or care about, much like anything else in life, if it's not in your wheelhouse, you're not going to worry about it until it happens to you. Man, yeah. Even with what's going on in the world right now, many people believe COVID was not even a thing because it wasn't happening in their house. And then all of a sudden it spread to their house. Oh, and now it's a problem. You have to think about the holistic thing the whole time. Otherwise, it's going to keep being background noise, and no one's going to listen unless everyone listens.
Yeah. And nobody has stepped forward. There has not been one heroic gesture that I know of. We would know if a minor leaguer put down the bat and says, "You know what, I can't be part of this anymore," and walked off into center field. That would be more ambitious than what Kevin Costner did a month and a half ago at the Field of Dreams game. I'm kind of making a joke, but it's sad. I would love to see a minor leaguer maybe say, "You know what, I'm out of here." And then everyone would be like, "Where is he going?" And then after the game, he could tell the world this is why he decided not to be part of this, because he knew that it was a matter of the next pitch or the next day or the next week that some other child would be seriously injured. And he didn't want to be part of it. And then I'd be like, "You know what, man? You're the first guy to do that. Great job."
Right.
You shined the light on it. So what we're doing is we're attempting to shine a light on it. We're having a discussion. I'm going to give you the statistics, and it ain't pretty, how many kids have been injured over the last X amount of years. You see, in Major League Baseball, there's 53,000 foul balls a year. And some foul ball guy website said only 20,000 of them reach the seats. Only 20,000. So that would be about 60,000 on the minor leagues because it's about 3 times as many more games. So we're talking about whatever. And this is conservative numbers. 80,000 balls are reaching seats per year. Yeah, hello, 80,000. And how many of them are going over 100 miles per hour? I mean, these are like, if there was one of these that almost hit both of us while we were walking down the street like a brick loose because they were waiting for the cement and the reinforcement, there would be nobody allowed to walk down the street till the problem was fixed. Here, it's like, balls ricocheting, pinball machines, and families. It doesn't make any sense. People, unfortunately, there was an ESPN piece, which is also at foulballsafetynow.com, a 5-minute video, which I thought was very, very good. It was in line with what I'm trying to do at Foul Ball Safety Now. It had a lot of engagement, 750,000 views, 4,300 comments. 80% of those comments were negative. They're still blaming the fan. Pay attention. Stop looking at your phone. We're already in a situation we have no reason to be there to begin with. Sure, looking at your phone is worse, but we cannot get out of the way. Staring without blinking, we cannot get out of the way. So all that stuff it's really not going to move the needle, to enhance your safety at the game, by putting your phone away. You shouldn't be there to begin with. You can't get out of the way of a 100-mile-an-hour ricochet ball. You can't. And you have no reason to be in there with your kids, whether you're staring without blinking for 3 hours or whether you're looking at your phone, and you can't save yourself. So no more Garcia Parra, who's a familiar baseball player. He used to go over to the lines and talk dad to switch seats with child and he was obsessive about it, whether he went over the line because he was in his own world and he felt like he needed to say something to everyone. He would go to people and say, Dad, would you switch seat with your child? I'd rather you be 6 inches closer to the game than to the ball, coming at you than your child. And these players have been sharing this with us. We're the journalists and the broadcasters. I'll take a pause, Rich. I'm just going on.
Well, I don't know. It's a journalist. The broadcasters are paid to report the game. The game, that's it. If something happens in the game, even if there's an injury to a player, they don't really go deep into it. Ever since the Joe Theismann incident in football, they try to shy away from anything that causes stomachs to turn or things like that. So I can see the same thing for them. And if it happens to someone in the stands, they kind of pan the cameras away so no one sees it.
Right.
And that means the broadcaster is out of the equation at that point. Right. Now, the journalists who are in the booths next to them that are actually watching everything in the stadium, that's another question, because what is their boss telling them to say at that time?
Yep.
It comes down to what their boss is telling them at that time, just like everything else, just like what we talked about before. If someone is told you can only report that the sky is blue today, that's all they can report.
Yep.
They can't go against that grain. And it kind of handcuffs them as a actual journalist, because I don't think we have any of those anymore. There's no actual independent journalist that goes out there and tells you actually what is happening.
Well, we're attempting to now, so there you go. And in regards to these guys who are paid or work for newspapers, they're probably getting heat from their editors, who get heat from their publishers not to rock the boat, because the publishers of these papers need to sell their newspapers. They want access to the locker rooms, so they discourage the editors and the writers to write about this issue. I think there's something to it. That's it. MLB, sports pages, they sell newspapers, and if you don't want to piss off the owners of the teams, and unfortunately, I think they've compromised their journalistic integrity all these years. And I said when I started writing, no Hall of Fame for baseball writers. I said, and owners should be forced to sell the team. I said this when I first started writing, 2 years ago, and I stand by it now. Don't celebrate yourselves. There's no higher honor when you work in an industry that hasn't addressed this, where there's hundreds, if not thousands of people that are alienated from the game because they were maimed, and you guys don't even want to acknowledge them. And you don't, because you know that it's an admission of guilt, and then you're going to have to deal with it. And you're going to have to say, you know what, this can't happen. But they continue on. I have at least 43 kids that had mostly head injuries from 2008 to the present time. And most of them were accounted for the major leagues, but I believe there were probably 3 times as many more in the minor leagues. The reason why I say that is because the accounting is less accurate in the minor leagues. There's less media there. So maybe more than 100 children with head injuries from 2008 throughout professional, or at least minor league and major league baseball. I'm not even talking independent leagues or college leagues. I'm talking about under MLB domain. And then there was an NBC study that also did some decent journalism, which implied 4,500 injuries that reported to first aid between the years of 2012 and 2019. And I wrote 5,000. The LA Times guy wrote 4,500. Fine. We took the equation one way or another, but close. That was a non-baseball journalist, probably, because most of the people that write about this, when we do sometimes see journalists write about it, are non-baseball journalists. So 4,500 injuries, and this is only the major leagues. What are we talking about? 13,500 in the minor leagues. Now, they could have just been scratches and broken nails and possibly broken fingers. But were there 100 serious injuries out of 13,500? I believe so. Were there 800 serious injuries out of 13,500? I don't know. But enough. And that's why foul ball safety now is important, because people reporting to first aid. Check out the NBC report that was done, foul balls, also 2019. I was interviewed for that segment. They did not put me in there, but that was when I was first beginning. I hired a publicist, Rich. If you go to foulballsafetynow.com, there is an article of me in People magazine, or at least what I'm trying to do. LA Times, LA Daily News, Boston Globe, a few other places that you would be like, oh, this is pretty cool. But they're not investigative pieces. It touches on it. It says what I'm doing. There's a few quotes from people. It's not that investigative journalist that's on board as of yet. So that's why what I'm doing, somebody told me recently, because I've been on podcasts and I'm trying to possibly start my own, that they told me I'm the investigative reporter. And I was like, okay, then I am. Good. Well, but I'm certainly, if somebody comes along and says to me, hey, man, people are going to know this issue left and right. I'm this writer. And when I write an article, I got 1 million people to read it and a lot of people to comment on it. I'll be like, oh, okay, well, then great. But that hasn't happened as of yet. So yeah, we're on the march. Listeners can certainly go to the website at foulballsafetynow.com, and there's 2 petitions for sure. One to repeal the baseball rule, and one to add more nets. They sort of go hand in hand together, but they're 2 separate petitions. And if there's anyone who has expendable dollars and wants to make a statement with me, because it's not cheap to rent out 2 airplanes. I'm ready to rent out another one and tow a banner and make more statements. So, happy to hear your ideas. And if anyone was hurt by foul ball or has a story they want to share, or know somebody who was hurt or had a bad experience and they just want to talk on or off the record, they can also find me. I've been working with a professional writer, and we're really getting amazing interviews for the book, Rich.
Awesome, Jordan. Coming from a guy like myself who always thought he'd sit in the right seats to catch a foul ball, and somehow a foul ball never came near me, no matter where it's at in a ballpark anywhere in the world. Even when I went to games in Korea, they have great games in Korea, and that ball never came close to me. So right. if you don't want to get hit by a foul ball, just sit wherever I am, because that's where the ball is not going to come. I can almost guarantee it. It's not foolproof, but it hasn't happened to me yet. Jordan, I love the mission you're on for safety, for everyone's safety, and so they can still enjoy the game. It's America's pastime. It's now the world's a game around the world. Everyone plays baseball, and I think everyone will get something from this, from your website and from your book when it comes out, as to guide them in the right direction when they do go to a game, where to sit and what to look for when they do go to stadiums. So I appreciate you coming on the show, Jordan. Any last words you want to say?
No, thank you. You said it well. I thank you so much for the opportunity. Anytime this conversation can happen again, I'm going to be at it during this remainder of the season and through the off season. And this is really important. And thank you so much, and appreciate.
You know how we do this. Thanks for taking some of your time to spend with us on Fit Nation. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and share the link as much as possible. If you want to, please become a supporter to help us carry this thing on. We appreciate you. If you know someone that brings that energy, has a great story, is an up-and-comer in the industry of music, in the arts, have them reach out to us on themisfitnation.com. We will get back to them within one day and get them on here so they can share their story with the world. As always, till next time, be humble, stay hungry, and keep hustling, because we are Fit Nation.